right, hey everybody. We are on week 6 in FAM 401. And to get us started today, we have our agenda. We are going to go over a couple of reminders. We're going to discuss your audience description, and we're going to discuss your homework that is coming up this week, as well as looking ahead at some things for next week. Alright, so some reminders for this week are to, in addition to listening to this PowerPoint, you need to make sure that you read the APA PowerPoint. That PowerPoint is going to be your best friend when you get ready to write your audience description paper and your lit review papers. You can fail those papers if you do not have correct APA citations, and especially if there's any plagiarism within those papers. So please, please, please read those PowerPoints. I don't expect you to memorize everything in there, but you do need to be familiar with it, and you do need to know that you should reference that while you're writing your papers, so that you can format your in-text citations, your block quotes, and your reference pages correctly. And in addition to just reading the PowerPoint, there are some practice questions within the PowerPoint. When it comes to the practice questions, the actual question is in black text and the answer is in red. I would really encourage you to actually practice those. Don't just look at the questions and then the answers. Actually try to go ahead and format those APA style reference pages and in-text citations so that you can be fully prepared to do that whenever it gets time for you to write your papers. Next week, you've got Form 1 due and your completed LNRAs due. And when I say next week, we're talking about week 7 now. We're not in week 6. So for week 7, in addition to your regular homework, you've got these 2 other components that are really important. You're going to have Form 1, which has to be signed after the completion of your first 3 service learning hours, and you have to have your completed LNRAs. So that means the LNRAs that have been filled out by the people at your agencies. So you need to make sure that you're on that this week because they are due next week. Go ahead and download Form 1, look at it, and make sure you're familiar with what all needs to be completed on that form. It does have to be signed by someone at your agency saying that you have completed your service learning hours on the dates that are specified on your document, so make sure that you do print that out and take it with you to your service learning hours. Alright, so we're going to look at your audience description today. If you look at your syllabus, your audience description isn't actually due for a couple more weeks, but the information you're going to need to write your audience description paper is information that you're going to have to gather while you're doing your service learning hours, so I want to make sure that you're aware of everything that needs to go into that paper before it's actually time to write it so that you can gather that information while you're at your agencies. So your audience description is going to answer the question who, if we think way back to our 7 design steps. And if you'll recall, we said that that is the most important step in your program design. If you don't know who your audience is, it's really, really hard to serve them and to write a presentation and prepare a program that's designed specifically for them. So that's going to inform every other aspect of your program, and it's going to be included in your program design as your audience description paper, and that paper is a minimum of 3 pages. Your audience description is derived from your needs assessment and sound relationships with your audience, so that means you're going to find out information that's needed from for this paper from both your paper survey that you hand out, as well as having a good relationship with your audience so that they have felt comfortable enough to disclose some of the things that are needed for this paper to you. And you want to use as many descriptors as possible. And something important to note for this paper is that you're going to have your audience narrowed down to who exactly am I presenting to. Am I presenting to the adult population that receives services at my agency? Am I presenting to the lead teachers? Am I presenting to the assistant teachers? Am I presenting to the staff at this agency? Am I presenting to the directors at this agency? Who is my exact audience? You have to have that kind of narrowed down to who they are in order to be able to write this paper. So make sure that you're figuring that out at your agency over the next couple of weeks. You do have to, kind of work with your point of contact or your supervisor at the agency in order to really narrow that down. Right, so when we're talking about descriptors that you want to have for your audience, you need to know the general size of your audience. So are you presenting to 3 to 5 people? That does need to be the minimum size of your audience. You need to have at least 3 people in your audience. You can have as many people as you can gather. So are you presenting to that minimum size, 3 to 5, or are you presenting to 25 to 30? Who all is going to be in your audience? What are the genders of the people in your audience? What are their ages? Please don't go ask the people at your agency how old they are. Please just give us kind of an age range. So mid 30s, late 50s, early 20s. What's their age range? And their educational level. That's something that is appropriate to ask them. What type of education have you had to obtain in order to get this position that you have with this agency? Socioeconomic status, that's another thing that you're not going to ask your audience directly. What's your socioeconomic status? That's something that you can kind of infer from your relationship with them and your interactions with them. When we're talking about careers, what prior careers have they had? Is this current career in any way related to their degree? Maybe they have a degree in business, but they're working at a family therapy clinic. So just making sure that you know all the backgrounds of careers of your audience, as well as the future careers they intend to pursue. So do you enjoy your job here? If so, how long do you think you'll stay here? Do you think you'll ever move on to something else? What other kind of careers are you interested in? Those are questions that you'll be asking your audience. Culture. This is going to involve things like mostly race here, because we've already got other cultural aspects covered as far as age and gender and socioeconomic status, but you definitely want to know the race makeup of your audience. And then special interests. This does not mean who is their favorite college football team. Special interest is within their field. So do they really enjoy giving parent education classes as part of their job, or do they really like working with kids the most, or is early literacy really their focus of the work that they do? And making sure that you understand kind of who they are and what areas of service they're really tuned into. So those are some examples of the descriptors, the kinds of descriptors of your audience that you want to make sure you have for this paper. Alright, so this is an actual rubric for the paper. It's broken down over the next few slides. We're going to just walk through it together. So the first one is the purpose of your agency. In order to get all of your points, 3 out of 3, you're going to need to have strongly presented the purpose of your agency. So when we talk about the purpose of the agency, we want to know, why does this agency exist? What population are they seeking to serve? And what problem are they trying to solve by existing? So if it's a child development center, they're existing in order to solve the problem that people need childcare while they're at work. If they are an agency that's working with special needs children, they're trying to solve the problem that a lot of services do not exist for families that have special needs children, and they want to make them feel included and accepted and have as many options as other children do. So make sure you fully understand the purpose of your agency. And that can happen through conversations with people at your agency, as well as researching online. All right. And then audiences prior training and education. You want to make sure that you strongly present your audience's prior training and skill of content area. So when we're talking about content area, several of these categories are going to list content area. You want to think about the theme of your presentation. You don't have to have that nailed down exactly yet, but you need to kind of know what general direction you're going to go in order to be able to write this paper. You will have that 100% nailed down by the time it's actually time to turn this paper in. But for now, you just want to kind of think in general terms, what am I going to be talking about when I'm presenting at my agency? Again, you'll have that nailed down before it's time to turn this paper in, but you do need to go ahead and start brainstorming that because it's probably a good idea to go ahead and get a good start on this paper as you're completing your service learning hours before you actually have that nailed down. So for this category, as it relates to your topic, your content area, what education or skills do they have in that area? So if you are presenting on communication, what prior training or education do they have in that specific area of communication? And you want to make sure that you don't say none. Your audience always has a certain amount of training or education in a certain area. It just may not relate directly to your content area. So if they don't have specific training or education in your specific content area, so what you're going to present on, you still need to tell me what their training and education is. Okay, so kind of two things going on there. One is what prior training and education do they have as it relates to your topic of your presentation, and you're going to tell me that. If they don't have any, you're going to tell me they don't have any, but then you're still going to tell me what their prior training and education is. So what degrees do they have? What special training do they have? Do they have any CEU credits? What CEU credits are they responsible for getting each year, and things like that. Okay, so the next section is the audience's access to tools and techniques. For this part, you want to make sure that you strongly present the audience's access to tools and techniques. And we're talking about that, I want you to think about resources. So what resources do they have available at their agency? Do they have a playground for kids to play on if it's an after-school program? Do they have a family resource room if it's an agency that serves families as a whole? Do they have a certain curriculum that they follow? Do they have a certain behavior management plan that they follow? What exactly are the tools and techniques that this audience uses on a daily basis? Okay, then our next section is going to be the benefits of educational presentation. You want to make sure that you strongly present the benefits of your educational presentation to your audience. So what you're going to tell me is, after I've given my presentation on whatever my topic is, these are going to be the benefits to this audience. Things are going to be better at this agency after hearing this presentation because X, Y, and Z. So what are going to be the benefits of them hearing your presentation? If there are no benefits to your audience of hearing your presentation, you should probably pick a different topic, because the whole point of this is for your presentation to be beneficial to your audience. Okay, the next one is your audience's knowledge of your intended topic. So before we talked about what education and training do they have related to your topic, and now we're talking about what knowledge do they have of your topic. So what do they already know about what you're going to tell them? And again, you don't want to say they know nothing, because they know something about every topic. So again, if we go back to communication, say you're presenting to them about appropriate workplace communication, it may seem like they don't have any knowledge about what's appropriate, but they do have knowledge of communication. How are they currently communicating? If they communicate sarcastically or passive-aggressively, they have knowledge. They've learned those skills of how to communicate in those ways. So you're going to tell me what knowledge they have about your topic, whether it's positive or negative or good or bad. What knowledge do they actually have related to your topic? Lastly, as it relates to your audience, you're going to tell me the cultural characteristics. So this is where you're going to tell me things like age, race, gender, socioeconomic status, just giving me kind of a clear overview of who your audience is, what the makeup is of your audience as a whole, and just how that looks. And then this last section of what you're going to write about is your intended presentation methodology. This is basically a lot of fancy words for how are you going to put together your presentation. And the answer should be through dialogue education. That's what your textbook that you're reading, your VELA textbook, is about, dialogue education. And that's the kind of presentation you're going to put together. So in this intended presentation methodology, you're going to tell me why you're going to use dialogue education and why that's going to work for your audience. Alright, then some just general things about your paper. You need to have a structure to your paper in order to get all of your points. You want to make sure that you use all of the headings that are listed down the left-hand side of this paper or of this rubric. So you're going to start with purpose of the agency. You're going to write that as a heading. You should have one healthy paragraph, 5 or 6 sentences under each section, and that will get you to your 3 pages, no problem. But you need to make sure that you use all the headings in order to get all of your points for structure. For language, you want to just make sure that you're free of spelling and grammar and vocabulary issues. You should be getting feedback on that in your critiques each week, so make sure that you're checking that. And feel free to use the Writing Center or the Advisement Center to get additional feedback or proofreading of your papers before you turn them in. The next section is your audience. What this is saying is, does your intended topic make sense for your target audience? So if you're telling me that your target audience is the preschoolers at a child development center you're working at, and you're going to present to them about communication, that doesn't work for 2 reasons. One, because the topic of communication is not appropriate for preschoolers. It doesn't make sense for them. And 2, because you have to be presenting to adults. You are not allowed to present to minors or children for this presentation. So just make sure that your topic, what you're presenting on, makes sense for who your audience is. And then lastly is your documentation of resources. You have to use APA style, which again is why that PowerPoint for this week is really important. But you need to format correctly with in-text citations as well as a references page. 3 sources. You have to have a minimum of 3 sources for this paper, and they need to be cited correctly both in your paper and in your references page. Alright, so this is just a breakdown of your paper requirements in more detail. It just goes section by section on the rubric and gives you some pointers of what you should be talking about for each section. So do make sure that you kind of reference this if you can't remember exactly what I've said for each section. The main thing to remember is that you have to have a minimum of 3 sources. There's actually an error up there at the top. It says minimum of 3 pages, 15, 30, and 60 points. You're only turning in 2 drafts. They're going to be worth 30 and 60 points. Not real sure where that 15 popped up. But do make sure that you're following the rubric and that you're kind of using these questions as a guide. You can see throughout here that I've also told you where a good place to use a resource would be. So on this section, the bottom section, the benefits, it's always a good place to stick in a resource for the benefits section. You can look up what are the benefits of my topic. So again, we'll just stick with communication today. If communication's your topic, you look up what are the benefits of healthy communication in the workplace. Find a good resource for that and stick it in there. Alright, other good places to use a resource for this paper. The cultural characteristics section. Tell me things about the culture of your audience and do some research on that culture. And then lastly, another good place to use a source is your training methodology. So you're going to be talking about training your audience, your actual presentation. You're going to be using dialogue education. So a really good source for that is your book, to cite your book and say, this is why dialogue education is going to be beneficial for my audience. Alrighty. That wraps up our discussion of your audience description. Like I said, that's not due for a couple of weeks, but do make sure you're familiar with the paper. If you have any questions about it, go ahead and shoot me an email. You're going to need to make sure that you really understand it in order to be able to complete your discussion question for this week, and in order to get all the information you need at your service learning hours at your agencies. Alrighty. So looking ahead, Critique 4 is due this week, week 6. It does cover 3 chapters, which is different than the rest of them. So Critique 4 covers chapters 7, 8, and 9. So make sure that you do have all 3 of those chapters included in your critique. Your Form 1, like I said before, is due on the 3rd, so you've got to be finishing up those hours this week. And then your Discussion 4 is due this week. Alright, so if we take a closer look at Discussion 4, it's basically going to be a mock mini version of an audience description paper. So please do make sure that you read all the materials for this week before you try to do this. And so other materials in addition to this PowerPoint that would be helpful to look at would be all the materials located in the assignment folder under the Assignments tab under the Audience Description Assignment. So what you're going to do is, like I said, complete a mock abbreviated audience description, and it's going to be based on an episode of King of Queens. And you can find the link to that episode. It's just in a YouTube video on the discussion board site on Blackboard. It's not the best quality of the episode, but do view it because you can still get everything that you need for this discussion assignment from that. Alright, so after viewing the episode, you're going to complete an audience description assuming that Doug and Carrie Heffernan, they're going to be the main couple, are your intended audience. And you are going to pretend that you're giving them a family life education presentation, so you're pretending like they're your audience and their family is your agency, so to speak. And the topic that you're going to present to them on is caring for elderly parents, okay? So you're putting together your presentation. You already know that this is going to be your topic and that they're going to be your audience, and you're going to complete your audience description based on those two things. And that topic is going to make sense for you as you watch the episode. You might have to make some assumptions about the characters. Feel free to use your imagination and fill in some gaps of information. They might not directly tell you their education or training. Go ahead and assume some things just for the sake of this assignment. What I'm really looking for is to make sure that you know what goes in each section of this paper. Alright, each of the sections that are going to be listed on the next slide, you're going to need to list 3 or 4 bullet points of what information might go in that section of the audience description paper. And like I said prior, you might want to reference the materials located in the audience description folder under the Assignments tab to get a full overview of the paper even after you've gone through this PowerPoint. Okay, so the different sections that you need to discuss for this paper or this discussion question that kind of puts together a mock paper. You know already that the purpose of the agency is the top section of the rubric. You're actually going to skip that for this section because we're working with a family and not with an actual agency. We're not going to have a purpose of the agency, so you skip that section. So your first section should be audience's prior training and education. So what is their education level? What prior training might they have in any area, but especially in your content area, which is caring for elderly parents? Then what access to tools and techniques do they have? What resources do Doug and Carrie have? Consider family, friends, and physical resources that are available to them. What are the benefits of your presentation? So you're presenting to Doug and Carrie on the topic of aging, caring for aging parents. What are the benefits going to be for them? How will they be different after gaining knowledge that you're going to present to them about caring for aging parents? The next section, what is their knowledge of the intended topic? Based on what you see in the episode, what can you assume that they know about taking care of aging parents? Again, you're not just going to say they don't seem to know very much. You're going to tell me what they do know. What are they actually doing to take care of their aging parent currently? Even if it's good or bad, what are they doing? Okay, cultural characteristics. Describe Doug and Carrie's cultural characteristics. You want to include things like age, sex, gender, socioeconomic status, etc. And then intended presentation methodology. If you were going to actually give this presentation to Doug and Carrie about caring for aging parents, incorporating dialogue education, how might you present your information to them? You want to remember the different aspects of dialogue education and how dialogue education would be beneficial to them in this presentation. Remember, as always, your discussion posts are out of 15 points. 5 points is going to be spelling and grammar, and 5 points for having all the required parts of the discussion post, and 5 points for your response to your classmates' posts. When responding to your classmates' posts, you need to make sure that you do have all of the required sections. So again, there's those 4 required parts: comprehensiveness, organization, coherence, and spelling and grammar. You will respond to your classmates according to those 4 areas. And for this one, you want to just make sure that for comprehensiveness, they actually have all of the sections, and they have 3 or 4 bullet points under the sections. For organization, they need to actually use the headings for each of the sections, because that's an important part of your paper. For coherence, you want to make sure that what they're actually putting in each section is what belongs in that section. And then for spelling and grammar, that's the same as usual. It should be free of any spelling or grammar issues. If you have any trouble locating the episode or getting through this discussion post, please let me know. Again, just keep in mind that this is a mock audience description based on a fake audience, Doug and Carrie, and your topic is caring for aging parents. Okay? That wraps up everything for us for week 6. Do be sure to go back and make sure you look at that APA PowerPoint as well. Thanks.